right, Matt Miller is here, draft analyst for ESPN. He is in a Columbus, Ohio hotel near a Waffle House. I've never felt so patriotic, Matt Miller. That sounds amazing. What's going on, brother?
Not much, man. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, Ohio State Pro Day yesterday, Michigan Pro Day Friday. So it's a busy week here in the Midwest.
So I did my open quickly on this, but the value you get from Pro Day is what? I feel it's different for, like, we don't need to see Caleb Williams throw. Like, we're good there. I like the
Yeah.
fact that he made it a bit of a sideshow yesterday, and he's throwing 75-yard passes. I think he punted the ball at one point. I think that's kind of a funny use of it. But is there a genre of prospect that you get the most out of when you're at an Ohio State Pro Day? Because Marvin Harrison doesn't work out, but guess what? The Buckeyes have other prospects.
Yeah, no, that's the part of it, Kevin. It's like, okay, no Marvin Harrison Jr., but Michael Hall, the D tackle, put on a
Yeah.
show after a great Senior Bowl. So there's a lot of value in that. And then, there's late round guys. There's Steel
Yep.
Chambers and Tommy Eichenberg. You want to see those guys. Josh Proctor worked out. Those are all valuable guys, especially for what I do at ESPN, where a
Yep.
lot of my TV coverage is going to be day 3 of the draft. So seeing
Yep.
those guys is very, very important for me. It's also connecting with coaches. There's some agents here that you want to connect with. And you're starting to, like, I talked to Denzel Burke, who's going to be in next year's draft class. We saw Jack Sawyer work out, who's going to be in next year's draft class. So there is, a ton of value outside of, my first pro day for ESPN was Zach Wilson at BYU. And like, that was such like, so it's like the extremes of the coverage that you do. And so like the Zach Wilson one was like viral throws, and it's like, oh my God, this sideshow of a pro day. Ohio State was, much more business-like, and I mean, they rolled out the red carpet. They were amazing for us. But you're evaluating those guys who are not going to be top 100 picks.
Completely agree. Great breakdown of that. The fact that the two most vivid quarterback pro days of my lifetime are Johnny Manziel and Zach Wilson tells me what I need to know about whether or not
Right?
quarterbacks should throw a pro day.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, no one has come out in a helmet and shoulder pads since Johnny did it, with like the camo shorts that everybody was scrambling to buy. And
Wasn't
then,
like
Teddy had it
wasn't
bad.
like President Bush there? Oh yeah. Teddy Bridgewater was the
Yeah.
he had a bad one, right?
Yeah, the bad one. And it was like, oh, he's terrible. And it hurt. I think it did hurt him. But yeah, the Johnny Manziel pro day, like, he comes in on a helicopter.
Yeah.
I think President Bush was there. It's no one will ever top
Bush
that.
won. No. And then the Josh Allen one where he was clear he was throwing to bartenders. That was the one. That was like, all right, we're trying to figure this one out. So we're gonna do most pro ready prospects, and that can mean so many things, because I think what we're saying is that the guys who can come in immediately and be an NFL player, no projection, we know exactly what they are. What's funny to me is, like, you make the case, like, the best player in the draft is usually the most pro ready. Like, Caleb Williams is really good.
Yeah.
Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to step in and be a day one guy. But I think that some positions lend itself to others. I'll ask you. I'll just open this up as broadly as possible. What in your mind defines a pro ready guy coming into the draft?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is where you were at in college, honestly. And I know that's like a vague answer, but it's like, who got you ready for the NFL? Because you're going to be asked to do different things at Michigan than you are at Oklahoma. And, so looking at it through that lens is a big part of it for me. Also, if you've been at the same school for 3 years now, this is where my job has changed so much. If you've been at the same school for 3 years now, I'm going to believe you're a little more pro ready, quote unquote pro ready, than if you've bounced around, because you've been developed. And especially offensive linemen, defensive linemen, if you have some continuity in your background, that's a beautiful thing for me, because I see that you've been developed. And, we've seen a track record of quarterbacks who can jump from Oklahoma to USC or from Arizona State to LSU and have a lot of success. But, those guys have been at those schools for multiple years. So I think that part of it helps. But, when I think about pro ready, it's usually guys who are highly productive in Power 5 conferences, and you're coming from a school that has a coach that's probably done some time in the NFL, like a Harbaugh or, a Steve Sarkisian, guys. Nick Saban obviously is a great one. Someone who knows what NFL teams are looking for.
It's a great breakdown. And I will say this. You mentioned development. For me, the biggest development thing in college is weight room. Just like strength and conditioning. What did you grow to NFL size when you were there? I mean, so many of these guys, I follow Miami recruiting most of all, but like, the amount of guys Mario Cristobal will take, and they are, huge 6'6", but then 220, whatever. And you're just like, wait, and they're like, oh, he's gonna be a defensive end. And it's like, what? And it's like, no, college weight room. And then it turns out, he did that with Oregon with 5 guys. It's just the way this thing goes. You bet on frames and you go from there. So weight room is such a huge part of it. I wanted to ask quickly, you mentioned the bouncing around in the portal. How has the portal changed the way you evaluate?
It's a lot harder, honestly. Just number one, to keep track of where guys are at, and because I don't want to complain about social media on here, but if you say oh, Kevin Clark from the University of Miami, people are like, you idiot, he transferred to Central Florida. How do you, it's like that part of it is harder. You don't want to disrespect the player or the fan base by getting it wrong, so that's a big part of it. But also it has made it harder to, especially for offensive players, to know exactly what they're asked to do scheme wise. It used to be okay, I've watched this quarterback for 3 or 4 years. I have a pretty good feel for what he's been asked to do. Now it's almost like you have to relearn the player every year. I'm a big portal guy. I'm a big NIL fan. I think it's great for the sport. I love that players, finally have that opportunity. So I will adjust. That's the thing. Let's finally give these guys, the benefits that they deserve. I'll adjust. I will work on memorizing schools and things like that a little bit better.
Yeah, we have a couple of GMs coming on the show next week, and I want to ask them about this more in depth. But the one thing, the positive, I've shared with the audience the negatives on some of that stuff, but the positive is that guys can go, if they're trying to maximize NFL value, they can go where they're a scheme fit. And that didn't used to be the case. That did not used to be the case. And you get to see okay, or if they're just a backup. Again, Matt Castle, if he was born in 2000, would have been able to go to Oregon State, Oregon, Washington, Washington State, and gotten a full year of game reps, and we would have actually seen what he looked like instead of just sitting on the bench at USC. So it's a different deal. All right, pro ready, Matt Miller, your first pro ready prospect.
Yeah, I didn't intend to pick 2 guys on the same side of the ball, but I did, so I might change on the fly. But I'm going to start with Dallas Turner at Alabama, who I feel like is weirdly being slept on because we talk so much about 4 quarterbacks in the top 6 and these 3 awesome wide receivers. But the first defensive player off the board, Dallas Turner, is going to be a nightmare for offenses. At 6'4", 245, he ran a 4.48 in the 40-yard dash, which is backed up on tape. It's not just workout warrior. It's there. He had 10 sacks last year. He plays with awesome length. He's got massive hands. I've watched him in person, I think 3 times, as well as watching his game on tape. He's just a game wrecker, and I feel like for whatever reason doesn't get enough love and recognition because we're so focused on those sexy positions on offense. But Turner could have a year very similar to Will Anderson, who was defensive rookie of the year. I think that's a good kind of bar for him to try to clear in his first year.
And his testing was awesome. His testing was through the roof. I'm surprised there wasn't more buzz about that when you combine the tape and the athleticism, because I think there's guys, again, you mentioned it shows up on tape. There's a bunch of guys who tested really well, and then I watched them. I'm just like, these guys do not get off the ball quickly. I don't know what I'm watching. Turner, it seems like it's married a little bit more here when you watch the tape and the athleticism. So I completely agree with you. Is there a fit in your mind in the top half of the draft?
I'm begging, and I think this will actually happen. I'm begging he goes to the Atlanta Falcons because I think Raheem Morris, Raheem does such a good job at getting guys in space a little bit. He's going to keep his DNs. They're going to be a little bit heavier, and then he's going to have that edge rusher coming off the side. So I think Turner would be perfect in that scheme. You've got Grady Jarrett there. They've got some veterans. They've got a decent enough secondary that, they're going to have guys who are able to hold up in coverage that is going to give him that extra second. So that's my fit for him. And they've got a couple guys there. Arnold Ebiketie, who they got out of Penn State a couple years ago, kind of fits this mold too. But they don't have anyone like Turner. So that's also the fit where we're going to see him play, 70% of the snaps, and he's going to have this huge opportunity.
I love that. So I want to stay on that genre of player. And so for me, I just think if you can get pressure in the college game, you can get pressure in the NFL game unless there's exceptions. So I initially during the season, I loved Trice from Washington.
Yes,
Unfortunately, his testing is such that he's probably going to drop. He's probably not going to rise. And so I want to talk about him in a second, but he's not my guy. But I don't believe in a lot of exceptions, but when you get that many pressures and that many sacks, I would at least draft him higher than what his testing suggests. I don't know what that is, but I'll ask about that. Latu from UCLA, 62 pressures last year, top 5 in the country. The testing was there. and reading his scouting reports about the movement, the hand usage, the
Yep.
moves he has, the angles he uses, the motor. I just don't see a flaw here, except that he medically retired, and there's going to be questions about his neck. He had a pass rush win rate of 26% last year, according to PFF. He just seems to me, as long as the doctors give it the okay, he just seems to me like a guy who's going to step in right away and be able to get after a quarterback. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong. I absolutely love him. I have a 7 round mock draft coming out next week, and I just finished writing my blurb for Latu, going in the top 20. So I'm a big fan as well, and I got to talk to him at the Senior Bowl and was blown away by his mindset, which was like he's trying to be a pro, and he
Yep.
knows that his best tools are hand usage and the way he sets up counters and how he uses his length. Like, he knows he's not Dallas Turner from an athletic standpoint, but he knows that his tools are the best in this class. And so I love that about him. I mean, I think he had 23 and a half sacks the last 2 years,
Yep.
which
Yep.
is phenomenal. And every time you watch him play, you feel like you're watching someone who's been in the NFL for 3 years just because of how
Yep.
well he sets things up. I think he has the best hand usage of probably any defensive tackle in the draft, even more than just defensive ends. And there's not limitations athletically. I can remember earlier in my career, I would always fall for these pass rushers who had really good production and really good tools, but like no burst, no bend.
Mm-hmm.
But he actually has that. He has the burst and bend. So you feel confident that he's going to be able to come in and produce because like outside of medicals, every box really does get checked. And he's big. He's 6'5". I think he's 260, which is, that's prototypical. Whereas, my guy Turner is 15 pounds lighter. So you don't even have to worry about that side of it.
Trice, real quick, where would you slot him given the production, the
Yeah.
tape? I mean, he looked like a menace out there, but then the tape is a lot better than the testing. And that always gives me pause because the biggest misses are when you try to talk yourself into a non-athlete. And I'm not saying Trice he's not, he's not going to be an insurance adjuster. I'm just saying like the testing did not show an elite athlete, and at that position on the first 2 days, I have a lot of pause about taking a guy like that. Where do you slot him?
Yeah, I had him slotted at like end of round 2, beginning of round 3 before the combine. He's out of my top 50. He's out of my top
Yeah,
75 right now.
yeah,
So I think we could
yes,
see a team back into round 3 who's just like, hey, we're going to value their production.
yeah,
I remember talking to Field Yates about this during the season because Field loved Trice early in the year. I mean,
yep,
rightfully so. And I was like, God, every time I watch him, he just makes plays. Like whether it's a
yep,
pressure or a sack, like and I should probably look this up, but like the amount of sacks that he creates for his teammates felt
yeah.
enormous as well, just because of he does such a good job of getting that initial penetration. And then, he's got teammates that maybe come clean things up. But if I had to guess right now, I would say he's between, picks 90 and 110, 115 is probably the range for him.
That seems right, and I would take a flyer on him. I would go
Same.
25 picks
Yeah.
higher than you think. And I always think about like the just the ability to produce. I remember Bill Parcells. I don't remember what attribute he was talking about, but he was like, if he doesn't bite as a puppy, he's not going to bite as a big dog. And it's like if you don't show a proof of concept, then it's probably not going to develop at a higher level. And we know what Trice can do. And again, there was explosion on tape that just didn't show up in the testing. So I don't know where that is. And if you play fast, you can solve a lot of those problems. I don't know. I don't know what you do with them. Why should you bet with Caesars Sportsbook? 2 words, Caesars Rewards. Every bet brings you closer to the types of benefits only Caesars can offer. Hotel stays, VIP experiences, sports and concert tickets, and more. It's not just an app, it's an empire. All right, number 2.
Yeah, number 2, like I said, I accidentally went defense on both of these.
Oh, it's
but
fine. Unfortunately, we're unfortunately gonna do all defense because my second guy is a defender as well. But
maybe that says a lot about this class. So
Yeah,
I'm
maybe,
gonna go with Byron Murphy from Texas, who I was a little late on him, even as like a noted Texas homer. I was late on Murphy because I honestly like I didn't want to like jump too soon and people just be like, oh, okay, Texas fan, quiet down. So I was like, I'm gonna slow play this and just like gradually moved him up like 10 spots every time we did a big board update. And then finally it was like, okay, he's like my number 12 overall player. So I think he's one of those guys where you watch Texas play, they're running this 3-3-5 scheme. He's at 6'1", 310 pounds, playing 5 technique. You're like, okay, well, like, what is this guy doing? So you have to like dig in a little bit deeper. And when he was asked to one gap and rush the passer, he was unstoppable. And it's the first step
Mm-hmm.
quickness is crazy good. And there are times he's like one arm controlling offensive linemen because he's just so freakishly strong. So he's the guy this year where it's probably a little bit of me being just a massive homer to some degree, but every time I watch him, I fall in love with the way he plays, and I look at it too of like we have defensive tackles making $30 million a year now, and
Yep.
so you got to find
Ooh.
cheap labor basically, and so that's going to push him up the board as much as great testing or great film work is. That D tackle is a premium position now. Like when Chris Jones is making $30 million a year and Justin Matabuke is getting paid, like you got to go find the next guy, and that's actually I think he's a Justin Matabuke clone, just probably further
Oh.
along than Justin was coming out of college.
All right, I'm gonna unveil a take here that I just came up with on the fly. Most important thing, what best value in football is a great young quarterback on a rookie contract. Second best value is a defensive tackle who's a beast who's on a rookie contract too.
Oh
Because
yeah,
the amount of you're gonna have to pay a guy, a Justin Matabuke, a Chris Jones when they actually reach free agency, like it's massive now. And the gap is significantly larger. And also DTs you're gonna get later in the draft. A lot of these quarterbacks you're gonna have to take in the top 3, top 4. So
yeah.
the gap is even more narrow. So like if you can get a DT, where are you slotting Murphy?
I'll look right now. I have
Yeah.
him in the mock. I have him going 15 to the Colts, which is
Right,
just like
exactly.
like he's going to go
Fine.
middle of round one.
Yes, that's an
I wanted
awesome
him in
deal.
Seattle
If he's a
so
oh
bad. Like he and Mike McDonald would have been amazing together. And then I mean they kept Leonard Williams, which I get and respect, but I was like banging the table for him to be in Seattle because that's just it would have been beautiful in that scheme. So maybe it still happens, but he goes somewhere. If the Raiders hadn't got Christian Wilkins, I thought that was a really good fit. So he goes somewhere in that middle of round one.
where are you right now in Devondre Sweat after the combine?
I still like him. I think it's just you have to understand what he is and isn't. I mean, 366 pounds to move like he does is incredible. And I've thought that every time I've seen him. Even the Senior Bowl was like, how does someone that big move so well? And to be solid, it's not
Yep.
Terrence Cody, like he's solid at that size. So
Terrence Cody.
yeah, to go way back in the day, Mount Cody. I think probably middle round two is where Sweat comes off the board, but it's going to be one of those teams that has a vision for how to let him just wreak havoc in the middle, and don't ask him to be something he's not. He's not going to be your three technique. That's not what he does, but he can create a lot of problems whether he's playing nose tackle or one tackle. He's gonna allow other guys around him to flourish. That's what he did for the last 2 years in Texas.
Terrence Cody was when he was a junior college 410 pounds. I wanted to check. I wanted to fact check.
That was quick. That was good.
410 pounds. He got it down his last year to 385, and then by the time he was in the NFL, he was 345. So
that's
there you go.
remarkable weight loss. That's really impressive.
I think Saban got him to work, man. Saban got him to work. I would want to know like just what the ideal playing weight for Terrence Cody was. Unfortunately, he was a bad guy and got flushed out of the NFL, so we never found out.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get into my second guy, and it's a guy that I think it was funny. And I mentioned this last week. There was I'm certainly not comparing him to Aaron Donald. I never would, but there was something Jeff Fisher said about Aaron Donald last week that stuck with me, which is that he knew how to win, which you never think about from a defensive tackle standpoint, because Donald would set up. He would be like, all right, I don't want the first down sack. I don't want the second down pressure that's going to, result in nothing, or they're just going to check down. I want the 3rd and 7, quarterback's on his back. The game is over. To me, Braden Fiske of Florida State
Ooh, that's a good one.
Is every time late in games, he'd be the one making a move to get the pressure, to make the sack. He's older. He's a Western Michigan transfer. He developed there. You mentioned the Texas thing. I went to Miami. I'm the anti-homer where when Florida State has somebody good or Florida has somebody good, I just go, Lord help us. And I'm so like Jalen Ramsey. With that, people are always like, are you a Miami homer when you see these guys in the locker room? I'm like, no, I have undying respect for Jalen Ramsey because he ruined my life. And like, what am I supposed to do? Derwin James, same thing. And so with Fiske, the testing was great. He's only 292, but you can work with that. He's older, as I said, so he's not. The ceiling is not as high, but the testing is phenomenal. The playing is phenomenal, and I know like there's no such thing as a clutch lineman necessarily, right? And I've heard I was just talking to an offensive lineman who thinks that pass rush wins losses is 90% lineman technique, offensive lineman technique, and 10% who the pass rusher is. It's really a good offensive line with good technique normally beats a good defensive tackle. Having said that, or defensive end. Having said that, Jordan Travis goes out, and it felt like Fiske and Verse said, we have to go
Yep.
win these games on our own. And you saw that against Florida, and you saw that against Louisville. And I thought, listen, there were a couple insurance adjusters in the offensive line, but still, they went out and won the game in the fourth quarter. So to me, I just loved the way they played down the stretch. And Fiske, to me, who I think snuck in probably to the back half of the first round, I think to me, that's the kind of guy I want on my team to contribute immediately, because he gives you speed on the interior, and that's at a premium.
Yeah, I think he is almost the anti Tavondre Sweat in that,
Yeah.
it's like but you have to have the same vision, like how are we going to use this guy? Because he is, it's weird to say 292 pounds. He's a little bit undersized, but he is he's a little bit lean for his body type. But, the Senior Bowl was my like wake up party for him, because I watched him throughout the season. And I've said the same thing as you of like, God, when they needed that defense, Verse and Fisk just came on. Like they took over games. They really did. And I loved that aspect of it. But then you see him in person at the Senior Bowl, and no one can stop him. Like, and those aren't insurance adjusters. The idea is they're some of the best offensive linemen in the country, and they had no plan for him. So he's another player. Like whether it's back into round one, top half of round two, I think that's where he gets selected. But I'm with you. Like game ready, he's there because he is older, coming out of a really good defensive system at Florida State, and even if he is just initially a pass rush specialist at defensive tackle, he's going to be a really, really good pass rush specialist at defensive tackle. So his scheme fit will be one that's kind of fascinating to me, just to see exactly where he lands and where he ends up. But I have him rated right now as my third defensive tackle behind Byron Murphy and Jerson Newton, who Newton's been, injured throughout this whole process. We haven't seen him do anything. So I wouldn't be shocked if he's the second D tackle off the board.
Hey, I have a kind of a loaded question for you. So as the Power 2 essentially breaks away from the Big 12 and the ACC, and certainly, I mean, the G5 is getting to be an afterthought, because anybody in the G5 who shows NFL potential most of the time is going to transfer to let's call it Power 3. Because I do think there are still people going to Clemson and Florida State and Miami, certainly. I mean, Cam Moore just went to Miami as an example. As the talent gap seems to grow, especially with the SEC, do you look at a team like Florida State differently going against ACC tape? Is it there yet where that's factoring into your evaluation, or are we a couple of years off from that?
I think we're still a couple of years off, but it will get there, and that's where events like the Shrine of Senior Bowl are going to be huge for those players, because, like Quinyon Mitchell from Toledo, you watch his tape and you're like, oh my God, he looks like a shutdown NFL corner, but it's Toledo. And then he goes throughout the pre-draft process and dominates, and you feel a lot better about that. I was telling someone yesterday, my second Senior Bowl was Khalil Mack and Aaron Donald, and loved watching Khalil Mack. That at Buffalo against Ohio State, still one of the best games I've ever seen. But you're like, okay, well, the rest of the time it's Buffalo. How good is he? And then you see him against elite offensive linemen, and it changes your perception. So I don't know the ACC's there yet. It might be a couple years away. It may never get to that point, but you certainly have to keep some things in perspective. And, the Big 12 100% got to that point of you couldn't even really look at stats on some Big 12 guys, because week to week, it's like JUCO versus you might be playing a national championship contender. So it made it really tough.
Give us one thing you're looking forward to at Pro Days the next couple of days.
Yeah, so I'm at Michigan. I just want to see McCarthy throw more in person. That I thought his combine was really uneven. He was a little slow to warm up. He had some troubles going to his left, and then he, throughout the session got better. So watching him throw to Roman Wilson and Cornelius Johnson is going to be huge, just to see the comfort level. And I want to see, does he settle in? Does he seem more comfortable? John Beck is going to be running that session, who famously did the Zach Wilson
Beck,
throw day.
All right, baby.
So we should see some fireworks at the end of it, at least.
Wow, John Beck.
He's carved out a nice career as the QB Pro Day guy.
I saw him. I didn't know that. I saw him at a Cowboys camp a couple of years ago, and I was just like, "What the hell is John Beck doing here?" This may be 2018, and somebody was like, "No, he's one of the stud QB coaches." So there you go. Cam
right?
Cameron was right. Cam Cameron knew, baby. His one.
Jordan Palmer and John Beck, they're the guys.
They are the guys. All right, Matt Miller. What are you working on that you're excited about right now that people need to know about?
Oh my
Anything
God.
coming up?
Yeah, a lot. So I have my fresh top 50 with player comps for every player comes out. I think maybe tomorrow. I don't know my schedule right now.
Okay.
Yeah, and then 7-round mock
Soon.
draft comes out in a week. So that's always fun. Doing it a month before the draft is very stressful, and it will all probably be wrong, but it's fun to do.
I think we know number one. So
Yeah,
that's,
well,
you're
I think
safe
one
there.
will be right. Yeah, we're good there.
We're safe there. We're safe there. Matt Miller, enjoy the Waffle House, enjoy Columbus, and later today enjoy Ann Arbor.
Thanks, appreciate it.